What's up, everybody? Welcome back. I'm Abe, and this is, well, it's not Stellaris, but it's the patch notes for version 2.0. These have been out for about a week. I've been on vacation, so I apologize for not getting to them sooner. But it looks like they're drastically changing a large portion of the game, and it's worth getting into. So I'm just going to jump right into it. We can talk a little bit about what each of these things means. And I picked up Apocalypse, and I'm excited to play a new version of the game with you. So I'll continue doing the tutorials, and then yeah, we'll just do some playthrough on the side as well. So let's just get right into it. So right off the top, this is version 2.0. This is the Cherry H patch notes. Also, they're being released with Apocalypse. And so the designer notes, it's changed quite dramatically for 2.0 and in our experience for the better. Overall, you can expect the gameplay to have been slowed down a little, and you now need to make active decisions on which star systems you want to expand into and control. You will need to build star bases to control systems and defend your borders. You will need to outfit your star bases with shipyards to build military ships, or turn them into powerful fortresses to defend vital choke points and strategically important locations. How you use your fleets will be different as well, as you now will have a limit on how many ships you can have in one fleet. It will also be important to make sure that your fleets are positioned correctly so that they can respond to any threat to your borders, whether it be from pirates or hostile space empires. The war system has changed as well, and you now need to make claims on an enemy's territory before declaring war on them. That means that it is now possible to declare war for a single system without having to wage a long, drawn-out war for it. Larger wars have changed as well with the arrival of the Colossus in the Apocalypse expansion. The Colossus is a powerful super weapon that can be equipped with various armaments, one of which is capable of blowing up a planet. So that's kind of what I knew about. I knew that we were getting into Death Stars, but we'll just keep moving. So the expansion features, the Colossus, like they said, is added a new ship size called the Colossus with graphical variations for all ship sets, including plantoid and humanoid if those species packs are owned. The Colossus needs an Ascension perk and can be equipped with different planet killer weapons capable of devastating entire planets. The Titan, they added a new ship size called the Titan with graphical variations for all ship sets, including plantoid and humanoid. I'm muting one of my tabs so that if somebody sends me a message, you don't think you got a message. Titans are massive ships with Titanic-class weaponry that serve as the flagships of your fleet and have auras that can buff friendly ships and debuff hostiles. Ion Cannon added a new defensive platform called the Ion Cannon. The Ion Cannon is a Titanic-class weapon meant to defend your starbase against enemy capital ships. I assume it's to defend your starbases against Titans. Ascension perks. These are what you get when you complete one of the categories in Unity, or with your Unity buildup. So you get the Colossus project, which is required to build the Colossus. You can choose now Enigmatic Engineering, prevents enemies from reverse engineering debris from your ships and extends sensor range. And Nihilistic Acquisition, which allows you to abduct pops while bombarding enemy planets. Pops or population. New Civics, Life Seeded, changes your homeworld into a size 25 Gaia world, but also makes other planet classes uninhabitable for your species. Barbaric Despoilers allows you to raid and abduct populations, or pops, while bombarding enemy planets, but other empires will dislike you. Post-Apocalyptic changes your homeworld into a tomb world and allows your species to survive on other tomb worlds. Unity Ambitions, a new set of very powerful edicts that cost Unity to enact. The cost is equal to one tradition unlock. One tradition unlock. Okay, so... Unity ambitions are unlocked by the Ascension Theory technology. So that'll be interesting to see. I don't... Off the top of my head, I don't remember what a tradition unlocking is. All I thought of was Ascension perks. But anyway... Marauders added a new type of non-playable empire from which you may hire fleets, admirals, generals, or pay them to attack your rivals. A Marauder empire can awaken under the leadership of a great Khan, constituting a mid-game crisis. When that happens, the Marauder empire will begin to expand and attack its neighbors. I liken these to the barbarians in Civilizations games. And there are also sort of not subspecies, but like sub-factions that can attack you and send out roaming armies as well in Endless Legend. I picked up Endless Space 2, but I haven't gotten into it yet. Anyway, music, they added 3 new music tracks by Andreas Waldetoft. Anyway, other expansion features, Utopia, Psionic Assimilation. It is now possible for empires that have completed psionic ascension to give other biological species residing in their empire the psionic trait through assimilation. Alright, now, that was all part of the expansion. Free features. They've completely reworked FTL. Every empire now starts with the hyperdrive FTL. Wormhole travel and warp travel are no longer available FTL types. I know, Ella, it's a big change. FTL types at the start of the game and have been changed into additional and very different from before modes of travel detailed below. Pairs of natural... God, dogs are... I know, Bailey. I'm excited too. Pairs of natural wormholes can now be found scattered across the galaxy, connecting 2 star systems across vast distances. It is possible to pass through them for near instantaneous travel with the correct technology. Gateways are ancient megastructures connected in a network. Hold on, let me get the girls out of here. Hey, come on. Go into the other room. Yeah. We're talking about Stellaris right now. It's very important. Very important. Gateways are ancient megastructures connected in a network. Like the wormholes, they allow instant travel across the galaxy. Gateways need to be activated before they can be used, and you are able to construct new gateways once you have the technology to do so. Gateways do not require Utopia to restore or build. FTL inhibitors prevent hostile fleets from advancing. They can only leave by the hyperlane they came from, while any FTL inhibitors in the system remain active. Starbases and planets get access to FTL inhibitors if you have researched the associated technology. Jump drives now allow fleets to make near-instantaneous point-to-point jumps that ignore hyperlanes. However, jumping has a long cooldown and significantly debuffs the fleet while the cooldown is in effect. So those changes alone drastically change, like they said, they're slowing down the game. They drastically change how people move around and how war will be waged. That's a really interesting change, and I'm surprised to see them change something that big this late in the game. Starbases. System ownership is now determined by who controls the starbase in it. Starbases are similar to frontier outposts and spaceports combined into one, and they can be upgraded and specialized with different modules and buildings. You must now fully survey a system before constructing a starbase in it. Starbases can be upgraded from outposts into citadels, 5 levels total. Starbases have module slots 0, 2, 4, 6, and 6 that can be filled out with different modules such as shipyards and trading hubs. Starbases have building slots 0, 1, 2, 3, and 4 that can be filled out with different buildings such as the Fleet Academy and the Nebula Refinery. Starbases can build and maintain their own fleet of defensive platforms. The number of defensive platforms a starbase can support depends on its size, buildings, and other factors such as ascension perks. Again, this reflects a drastic and severe change to how the game is played and how systems are controlled. I'm really surprised by a lot of this. Fleets. Fleet command limit is a cap on how many ships can be in the same fleet, effectively limiting how many ships a single admiral can command and provide bonuses to. Ascension perks. Most basic Ascension perks are now available in the base version of Stellaris. Megastructures and psionic/biological/synthetic Ascension paths still require Utopia. Added the Eternal Vigilance Ascension perk that boosts your defensive capabilities, increasing starbase defensive platform cap and effectiveness of defensive platforms and starbases. Added the Executive Vigor Ascension perk that doubles your edict duration. Alright, those are good. Army reworks. Now, these, I had read a little bit about this previously, and they were saying that they really needed to, and I keep using the word drastic, but they needed to really drastically change the way armies worked. So let's see what they've done. Attachments have been cut from the game. Some of their effects were rolled into text. Okay, that's good. Just seemingly a meaningless expenditure of resources. Defensive armies are no longer built, but are rather created automatically to garrison planets from certain buildings, such as capitals and fortresses. Orbital bombardment was changed. While a fleet is bombarding a planet, it will now deal damage to both armies defending the planet and the planet itself. Planet damage is a value that goes from 0 to 100%, and once it hits maximum, a tile on that planet will be damaged, ruining any building on it and potentially killing pops and creating blockers. More severe forms of bombardment do more damage to both armies and planets. Planets can now construct fortress buildings that provide additional defensive garrisons. Armies spawned by a fortress cannot suffer any damage from orbital bombardment while the fortress is functional. Assault armies engaged in battle on a planet will now cause collateral damage to the planet in the form of planetary damage similar to from bombardment. Different types of armies cause different amounts of collateral damage. Armies at low morale, or less than 50%, will now have their combat ability reduced, in addition to the more severe penalty that already exists for being at zero morale. I'm not sure I was even aware that there was a morale stat. Planets now have a combat width that determines how many units can take and deal damage at the same time during combat. Planets no longer have a limit to how many armies can be garrisoned on them. Armies now have a chance to disengage from battle when they take damage and their health is at less than 50%. Disengaged units will not deal damage or take damage as long as there are other units to fill the combat with. Retreating from an invasion now results in each retreating unit having a chance of being overrun and destroyed. The chance increases if the unit is low at health. So let's see. Planets have a combat width that determines how many units can take and deal damage at the same time. And there's no limit to how many armies can be. So they basically removed the limit on defensive armies, but they made it so that no matter how many offensive armies showed up, only 6 of them are going to be, or however many the number is, that only a given amount are going to be facing the same given amount on the defensive side. So even if you bring 20 armies, if the defender has, let's say the allotted 10 slots filled with really great defenders, you can throw your 20 armies against them, lose all of them, instead of having 20 versus 10. I'm not sure how I think about that, but we'll see how that plays out. Unit experience. Armies and ships will now gain experience from combat and rank up. Higher rank armies or ships are more effective in battle. I know that in the past, leaders gained experience and their abilities changed, but it'll be interesting to see how the armies and the ships themselves do the same thing. Galactic terrain. Certain systems will now have effects on ships in them. Pulsars, neutron stars, and black holes will affect ships in the same system in various ways, while nebulas can prevent all outside sensors from having a view of the system. That's cool. Fleet Manager. We have added a new interface that lets you manage your fleets. You can manage templates, retrofit designs, and reinforce all fleets. Technology. Technologies have been reworked into 5 tiers, and many have had their base costs changed. Renamed Atmospheric Restoration to Atmospheric Transformation. Doctrine Fleet Support no longer unlocks any spaceport modules, but instead increases naval capacity. Interstellar Fleet Traditions Tech no longer unlocks any spaceport module, but instead unlocks 2 starbase buildings. Auxiliary Fire Control Technology added to the game. Modular Engineering Technology has been added, which reduces starbase building and module build cost by 25%. Each ship size has 2 technologies that increase hull points. For example, corvettes can increase their hull points by 100 2 times. Each ship size has a technology to increase the build speed of that ship by 25%. Technologies that unlock new ship sizes also increase fleet command limit by plus 10. I'm not sure what fleet command limit is, but it might be how many ships are allowed in each fleet per the changes that they made earlier. Orbital hydroponics tech removed from the game. Okay, that'll change food production. Will to power tech removed from game. Wormhole stabilization technology has been added to the game, and it is required to travel through wormholes. Gateway activation technology has been added to the game, and it is required to activate gateways and to travel through them. Gateway construction technology has been added to the game, and it is required to build new gateways. Okay, that seems pretty standard to the changes that they've implemented up above. Traits. Traditional species trait has been added, which increases unity output. Quarrelsome species trait has been added, which reduces unity output. Let's see. Spaceports. Spaceports as an entity no longer exist, and starbases with shipyards and are required to build military ships. Every planet can build civilian ships through the Spaceport tab, including habitats. All Spaceport modules removed from the game. Some were converted into starbase buildings. Okay, pirates can now spawn in any unowned system near your borders. Pirate spawns keep getting stronger as the game goes on. Pirates will raid systems to destroy mining and research stations. Pirates cannot spawn during the first 10 years of the game. You know, it really sounds like they just were hell-bent on slowing the game down. And harrying people and destroying their mining and research stations definitely seemed like one more peg on that. I don't know. Sensors and intel. Sensor range is now a measure of how many FTL jumps away you can see rather than Euclidean distance. A sensor range of 1 gives view of only the same system, 2 of same and neighboring systems, and so on. Intel levels have changed. They are as follows: none, or unknown; low, unsurveyed but known; medium, surveyed but not in sensor range; and high, unsurveyed, in sensor range; and full, surveyed, in sensor range. You no longer need to survey systems owned by other empires you have comms with. Exception is systems owned by fallen empires or marauders. All right. Edicts. Edicts now all have an upfront cost and a duration rather than being able to be toggled on and off. The only exception are one-off edicts such as land reclamation. Removed a bunch of planetary edicts and many others were turned into empire edicts. In addition, many of them have had their effects tweaked or reworked. Recycling campaign empire edict added to the game, which reduces consumer goods cost. Healthcare campaign empire edict added to the game, which increases population growth. Education campaign empire edict added to the game, which increases leader experience gain. And fear campaign empire edict added to the game, which increases unity output and xenophobia. The game setup can now set when mid-game and end-game events will start at Galaxy Setup, can now set overall speed at which tech and traditions are unlocked at Galaxy Setup, and can now set frequency of wormholes and abandoned gateways at Galaxy Setup. And now for some miscellaneous changes. They added some new events for gaining additional precursor artifacts outside of anomalies. This should guarantee that precursor chains can always be completed. It is now possible to start a game with no other empires in it, but this will disable Conquest Victory. It must give you a chance to just sort of work and expand and explore. Also get to know the Marauders and the Pirates. You now start with your home system explored and largely fixed, or slightly randomized, number of resources present. No longer possible to trade star charts with other empires. Instead, you can trade for communications. War philosophy now controls whether or not you can freely make claims on other empires. It is always possible to claim systems of empires that you are fighting a defensive war against. Broken planets are now their own planet class instead of using the barren planet class. The Sildari are now spiritualist rather than materialist, as the prescripted empires were looking a bit materialist heavy. Changed the Iferics from xenophobe to pacifist and gave them corporate dominion to give them a different AI personality from Yondar's. Added new component reactor booster with 3 levels and accompanying text. Auxiliary slot component that gives extra power to ships. The basic version is available as a start tech. Mineral processing technology no longer gives plus 2,000 mineral storage cap, but rather unlocks Nebula Refinery. Consolidated mineral storage modifiers from techs into just a few techs instead of spread all over. Military stations removed as buildable station type. They are now defensive platforms for starbases. Added resource replicator buildings and accompanying late game tech, which converts 50 energy into 30 minerals per month. Auxiliary fire control auxiliary component added to the game, which is an aux or an auxiliary slot component that increases weapon hit chance. Curators now ask if you wish to renew their research agreement when it ends. Added a new Corvette section, picket ship, with 1 point defense slot and 2 small slots. And added a feral Prethoran events. Okay. And now for balancing. Armor has been reworked completely. It is no longer a damage reduction modifier, but rather a separate source of hit point, similar to hull points or shields. Weapons can deal additional or reduced damage to hull points, armor, or shields. Damage is first applied to shields, then armor, and lastly hull. Most weapons have been reworked in accordance with these new changes. All weapons have been rebalanced according to a 1.3 tech curve, meaning, for example, that blue lasers are 1.3x stronger than red lasers, rather than about 1.1 to 1.15 as before. Missiles have been completely reworked. All missiles now use the guided slot and ignore shields completely. Reactors are now a required component and are no longer placed in utility slots. Strike craft now only exist as one entity and are no longer split up between bombers and fighters. Point defense has been reworked to adjust for new strike craft stats. You now always start the game with laser, projectile, and missile weapon techs, as well as basic shields and armor tech. Okay, so then you have to research into it as opposed to picking it at the beginning and then having to like completely research a new technology if you want to get into it. Becoming Federation president now requires an empire to own at least 10% of a Federation's total planets, or at least half the number of planets of the largest member. Empires who do not fulfill this condition will be passed over for leadership. Only science ships staffed by scientists can now enter systems that you completely lack intel on, which stops Corvette exploration. Well, I did some of that, so that'll be a change. Added force disparity mechanics. In combat, a smaller force that is engaging a larger one, based on total combined fleet sizes, will now get a bonus to firing speed to make casualties in battles less lopsided. Smaller force engaging a larger one will now get a bonus to firing speed. Okay. Ships now have a chance to disengage from combat whenever they take hull damage while already at negative 50 or less than 50% health. The chance depends on the amount of damage dealt, the ship size, smaller ships have an easier time disengaging, and ship or country modifiers. Disengaged ships are not dead but do not take any further part of the combat and rejoin the fleet once combat ends. So one way to look at that is you spend a bunch of resources to make the ships, you can pull them out of the fight as they get low health and let everybody continue on without actually pulling the entire fleet out. So it allows you to preserve your ships basically and send them to the back. So that will change combat strategies quite a bit. Leaders now cost 200 energy to hire instead of 50 influence. That's interesting. Resettlement now costs energy instead of influence. Basic level 0 farms, mines, and power plants are removed. Level 1 buildings, farms, mines, power plants, can now be built on new colonies. Ship upkeep is now 1% of cost in minerals and 0.5% of cost in energy. That seems steep, but I don't know how it was calculated before. All right, ethics. Xenophobe ethics now reduce starbase influence cost by 20% and claim cost by 10%. Fanatic xenophobe ethics now reduced to 40% and 20%. Reduced by. Spiritualist ethics now increase unity output by 10% and reduce edict cost by 5%. Unity output and edict cost. And then Fanatic has doubled that. Okay, that's interesting. Civics, they buffed the Shadow Council to negative 75% influence election cost. Driven assimilators can now allow cyborgs to procreate. They do not need food to grow. Successfully assimilating a pop as a driven assimilator now generates 1 month's worth of unity and society research. There's an incentive to assimilate, at least as a driven assimilator. Driven assimilators can now research most genetic techs. Driven assimilators can now derive assault and defense armies from cyborg pops. Servitor morale modifier scaling has been made more granular, updating every 5%, every 5% biotrophy population rather than every 10%. Rogue servitors and assimilators can now uplift species. Corporate Dominion Civic now increases trading hub energy output by 1 instead of 10% energy credits. In addition, it also unlocks private colony ship. Really? You get energy output increased by 1 instead of 10%? That seems seriously low. Imperial Cult Civic no longer reduces edict cost by 33%, but rather increases edict duration by 20%. Cutthroat Politics Civic no longer increases monthly influence by +1, but rather reduces edict cost by 20%. Inward Perfection no longer increases monthly influence by 1, but rather increases edict duration by 10%. Charismatic Ruler trait effect on edict cost reduced from negative 20% to negative 10%. Planetary Unification technology now increases monthly unity by 5. And Distinguished Admiralty Civic no longer increases evasion or fire rate, but rather increases admiral level cap by 2. Traits. Fortifier Ruler trait effect changed to reduce starbase upgrades cost by 20%. Trickster Admiral trait now gives 25% ship disengagement chance instead of negative 50% emergency FTL damage. Charismatic Ruler trait effect on edict length reduced from plus 25% to 20%. Deep Connections Ruler trait now requires planetary unification technology and is no longer available for starting rulers. Eye for Talent Ruler trait no longer increases leader recruitment cost, but instead increases leader experience gain by 20%. Eager and New Boot now reduce leader cost by 50% instead of 33%. Fertile Trait now also increases unity output by 10% and other species happiness by 5%. Erudite Trait effect on leader level cap increased from 1 to 2. And Robust Trait gene point cost reduced from 6 to 4. And also increases all pop output by 5%. Let's see. Technology. Technology cost is now based on number of owned planets and systems. Number of pops has no effect. Corps of Engineers, or Corps of Engineers, now increases starbase upgrade speed by 25% and reduces starbase upgrade cost by 15%. Combat Training Technology now gives 15% assault army damage and morale boost. Technology is now twice as expensive to research for awakened fallen empires. Moved some techs to the computing and new worlds tech categories to make them more useful specializations. Renamed rocketry category to propulsion and moved kinetics weapons tech into it to make it a more useful specialization. All technologies should now belong to a category intended for its field, i.e. no more statecraft technologies in physics. Gaia creation technology removed from the game. Gaia world terraforming is now part of the World Shaper Ascension perk. Planetary unification technology now unlocks campaign edicts. Atmospheric manipulation technology removed. Terrestrial sculpting technology now allows you to terraform planets into other climates as well. Terrestrial sculpting technology base cost increased from 1,000 to 2,000. Ecological adaptation technology base cost increased from 3,000 to 4,000. And that same technology now requires terrestrial sculpting instead of atmospheric manipulation. Climate restoration technology now requires terrestrial sculpting instead of atmospheric manipulation. Galactic markets technology now requires colonial centralization instead of galactic administration. Galactic benevolence technology now requires colonial centralization instead of galactic administration. A lot of these are obviously just sort of reordering and renaming changes. Interplanetary research initiative technology now requires colonial centralization instead of galactic administration. Traditions. Tradition cost is now based on the number of owned planets and systems. The number of pops has no effect, like we said earlier. Expansion. Reach for the Stars expansion tradition no longer affects colonization influence cost, but rather reduces starbase influence cost by 10%. Galactic Ambitions expansion tradition no longer reduces upkeep for Frontier Outpost, but rather increases starbase capacity by 2. Domination Adopt Effect now unlocks Demand Tribute and Demand Vassalization diplomatic actions instead of the previous effects. Purity. Never Surrender Purity tradition now increases starbase hull points by 10% and defensive army health by 50%. Prosperity. Administrative Operations now also reduces starbase upkeep by 10%. Transstellar Corporations no longer unlocks Private Colony Ship, but rather increases energy output by 5%, and trading hubs produce an additional 1 energy. Harmony. The greater good effect on unrest reduction reduces from 25% to 20%. Supremacy Adopt Effect no longer increases border range, but rather increases starbase capacity by 2 and reduces starbase upgrade cost by 20%. So if there's a starbase capacity, maybe that's the capacity of how many buildings each starbase can use, but if they limit how many starbases you can have, that limits you on how much you can expand, which seems like they wouldn't want to do that. But anyway, Supremacy Finish Effect no longer increases fire rate, but instead unlocks War Doctrine policies, which allow you to give different bonuses to your ships. Master Shipwrights no longer increase naval capacity, but rather reduces upgrade cost by 20%. In addition, the effect on ship build speed has been increased from 15% to 25%. The Right of Conquest now reduces claim cost by 20% instead of war demand cost. War Games no longer increases admiral level cap, but rather increases command limit by 20 and ship fire rate by 10%. Discovery. Polytechnic Education effect on leader experience gain reduced from 33% to 25%. Ascension perks. There are a lot of changes here. Let's see. Ascension perks. Interstellar Dominion no longer increases border range, but rather reduces starbase influence cost and claim cost by 20%. Mastery of Nature no longer unlocks all tile blocker clearing technologies, but rather gives your planets access to an edict that can permanently increase their size by 1 to 3, depending on their size. In addition, effect on tile blocker clear cost reduces from 50% to 33%. One Vision now also increases Unity output by 10%. World Shaper now requires climate restoration technology. World Shaper no longer gives atmospheric manipulation technology, but rather unlocks the ability to terraform planets into Gaia worlds. In addition, effect on terraforming speed removed. Voidborn now only requires Star Fortress technology, and Galactic Force Projection effect on naval capacity reduced from 200 to 80. In addition, Fleet Command limit is also increased by 20. I gotta say, this looks like they're taking the teeth out of a lot of these Ascension perks, which makes them, I don't know, less impactful, less desirable? I don't know. Crisis. Reduce the chance of the contingency crisis triggering. Contingency now uses particle or tachyon lances instead of arc emitters, and contingency-occupied planets are now left without an owner upon liberation to prevent border gore. I'm not sure what border gore is, but it sounds bad. Fallen Empire. It is now possible to spawn 5 Fallen Empires in a huge galaxy if you have Synthetic Dawn. Okay, and now we're getting into miscellaneous. And this looks very long. It's no longer possible to release a planet undergoing stellar culture shock as a vassal. Native indoctrination now costs energy but gives society research. Increased the energy cost of native enlightenment and infiltration. Boosted the society output of passive and active native observation. Living metal now gives negative 20% megastructure build cost instead of 30% megastructure build speed increases. Reduced consumer goods cost of chemical bliss, utopian abundance, and social welfare as the happiness boosts provided were simply not worth the massively increased costs. Increased the effect of leader skill on election support. Domesticated pre-Thorin fleet no longer uses naval capacity and cannot be disbanded. Colonized planets and habitats always have a spaceport tab to build civilian ships. The fleet donated by the Cybrex no longer uses up naval capacity and cannot be disbanded. Machine leaders no longer cost 100% more influence. Random breakdowns are balanced enough against leader age. Afterburners now add some evasion. Synthetics in servitude no longer have a penalty to energy production. Hacking the Infinity Machine is now far more likely to succeed and yields a better reward. Self-modified pops now count as a different species for the purpose of species rights. Planetary shield generator now only requires planetary administration rather than capital. Xenophobe empires will no longer experience pop self-modification, as this would just result in them being instantly enslaved. Shields and armor technologies have now had their costs rescaled a bit. You now automatically have survey data on most systems owned by empires you have communications with. Certain empires, such as Fallen Empires, will not share survey data. Each ship class now has multiple types of combat computers to choose from, with different combat tactics suitable for the ship class. Science, construction, transport, and colony ships are no longer designable, but rather has a fixed cost and are auto-updated with the latest components. That's nice. Reworked enigmatic shields and power cores into dark matter deflectors and reactors. Tier 5 techs that can be scavenged from Fallen Empires. You can now repair and get reduced orbit maintenance at allied starbases. The orbit maintenance cost reduction is now applied when orbiting a starbase with crew quarters, not when orbiting a planet. Stars now always have some sort of deposit, so that there are no completely useless systems. That's nice too. Crystal-infused and crystal-forged plating are now regular utility slot items that add hull points to ships. Significantly reduced the amount of naval capacity empires get in the late game. Maximum possible naval capacity is now 1,000. Doubled the impact of more advanced thrusters on ship sublight speed. Shield capacitors now increase shield hit points by 10% instead of increasing shield regen. Lowered MTTH on the Dragon's Horde events. I don't know what MTTH stands for. Most ship sizes can now be inspected, even crisis ship designs. Defensive platform build time reduced from 180 to 120. I assume that is days. Defense platform upkeep costs reduced from 0.75 to 0.25x. Mineral processing and advanced mineral processing technologies no longer unlock mineral silos. Removed mineral silo buildings from the game and is now instead a starbase building. Added tradition effects on tech weights for some technologies. Private colony ship is now unlocked by the corporate Dominion Civic. Authoritarians can now use species-wide slavery. Equalized combat computer stats and specialized them more towards their specific roles. Habitat Labs effect on research output reduced from 3, 3, and 3 to all types of research to 2, 2, and 2. Gaia planets and machine worlds now have the same cost, 10,000, and time to complete, 7,200. Gaia world now increases pop output by 10% instead of increasing Unity output by 15%. The machine world effect on pop output reduced from 25% to 20%. Delicious Titans modifier now gives plus 20 food, static, instead of plus 50% food. Doubled the chance for non-Tomb World colony event chains to fire within the first 5 years after colonization. No. Sorry about that. Trader enclaves now give resources monthly instead of in lump sums when you make a trade deal with them. There's got to be a squirrel outside, and Ella just can abide no squirrels. The artisan opinion reward for patronage is now given immediately instead of monthly. Demand vassalization and demand tribute diplomatic actions now require domination traditions to be adopted. Art monument purchase cost increased from 1,500 to 3,000. Ministry of Culture purchase cost increased from 2,000 to 5,000. Ministry of Benevolence building influence cost increased from 100 to 150. Ministry of Benevolence building mineral cost reduced from 500 to 300. The Galactic Stock Exchange building influence cost increased from 100 to 150, and the mineral cost reduced from 500 to 300. The Research Institute building mineral cost was reduced from 500 to 300, and the influence cost was increased from 100 to 150. Plague Memorial building effect on happiness reduced from plus 10% to plus 5%, but now also produced 2 Unity. Consolidated the 3 curator enclaves into a single country. Energy torpedoes have been reworked into a long-range plasma-like artillery weapon that go into the large slot. All right. AI. Major AI work and changes for new and changed features. Fixed AI evaluation of which portal belongs to which extra-dimensional invader. Added a Crisis Fighter AI module used for Cybrex and Sentinels that should make them more effective at their jobs and less prone to getting stuck. Roaming space monsters now have their own AI module that should make them less prone to getting stuck or wandering into suicidal situations. Sectors will now always want to have at least 300 energy left after clearing a blocker instead of spending their last energy credits. User interface maintenance is now always referred to as upkeep. Tooltip for planet view pop counter now tells you the amount of each species on the planet. Expansion planner now hides planets in other empires' space. Map icons now differentiate between different kinds of military and civilian ships and show a different icon for ships that are in FTL. You can now see in the outliner when you have planets that need buildings or upgrades. Added more descriptive tooltips to species view to tell you which species are living on which planets. Added a help button in the connection window shown when failing to connect to a server. Systems now have a brief descriptive tag such as homeworld system or mining system shown in the nameplate in system view. This descriptive tag is scriptable in the systems_types database folder. Added a notification for when an edict expires. Sensor range is no longer displayed on the galaxy map. Single ships that are heading to merge with another fleet are no longer shown in the outliner. Galaxy and system view now show remaining duration on the tooltips for planets with ongoing terraforming process. That's helpful and sorely needed. Component torpedo slot T is now called the guided slot. Transport fleets can now be set to aggressive stance. Aggressive stance transports will automatically follow nearby military fleets and invade hostile planets if odds are favorable. And then there's a whole bunch for user modding and definitions and modifiers and triggers. Graphics. I'm going to skip over the modding just because it's long and this is ongoing. Added a new main title screen, improved the look of borders and galaxy map. Empire colors now use 2 colors and have their borders shaped by all owned systems rather than just colonies. Exploring a system next to the galactic core will now lift the Terra Incognita on the galactic core. Terra Incognita is now entirely based on which systems you have intel on. Hyperlanes are now brighter and more visible. Changed hyperlane color from green to cyan to help with accessibility. All right. Performance, less improved caching of pathfinding and system distance from FTL consolidation into hyperlanes. Less ships overall in late game should lead to increased performance. Added 10 new achievements. And there's a whole bunch of bug fixes. All right, let's do it. Here we go. Small space amoeba weapon is now properly a small size weapon instead of a medium sized weapon. Fixed event-generated countries getting the wrong randomized name lists. Improved descriptive triggers for species rights. Fixed and improved artisan troop interactions. Fixed layout and added new assets for gene modding header button. Fixed rebel countries, sometimes getting one ethic too many. Avoids crash when using a country that doesn't have a tech module. Fixes crash when a leader is of an invalid class. Fixed fleet move order showing the real name of unvisited systems. Outlawing sapient AI now only removes sapient AI assistant rather than also removing non-sapient AI assistant. I haven't really played with sapient AIs yet. Devouring swarms can no longer process robotic pops into food. That's probably good. Fixed a couple of anomaly categories never spawning. Fixed hot join country selector using multiple stars to indicate the previously played country. My voice is giving me trouble here, so I apologize. Crash fix when an invalid country invites a correct country to a federation. Fixed an assert and potential crash when a saved technology no longer exists. I assume they're talking about an asset. It is no longer possible to rename planets owned by other empires that are inside your borders. Auto-exploring fleets now use the correct status icon in the outliner. Added missing scope switch for description trigger and certain leader of trade events. Fixed machine uprising, silently fizzling out in some edge cases. Fallen machine empires can no longer have two simultaneous compliance demands on the same empire. Gene modding a species will now also modify an appropriate portion of owned colony ships with that species. Fixed the Horizon Signal event chain, causing unintended events to fire on tomb worlds in the player's capital system. Fixed factions and inwards perfection empires, referring to diplomacy traditions when they mean adaptability. Habitats are now destroyed when their pops are purged by the Praethoran. Prevent crash in weird cases when a galaxy has more nebulas than actual systems. Fixed national purity and native privilege agendas being available for fanatic xenophile empires. Fixed blurry egalitarian ethics icons when using low graphics quality. Fixed machine integrated species, sometimes not respecting their military service species right. Human Russian last names now have both masculine and feminine forms. Fixed fallen empires built from pre-scripted species not always getting all the traits they should. Earth custodianship now uses the humanoid graphical culture by default. Fixed plantoids species pack being listed as plantoid in the launcher. Fixes platypi species never being selected for random species. Fixes human preset and custom empires not spawning. Fixes the default species right not showing if you currently have a species without rights selected. Self-modified species are no longer blocked from colonizing, resettling, etc. in an empire where they are the primary species. Fixed a bug where rulers could level up and get traits focusing on ship sizes you had yet to unlock. Fixed a bug where auxiliary slots would not get a proper border in ship details view. Made sure that the same existing order check used for construction ships to see if order is valid is also used to anomaly research. Fixed the faction demand recent enlightenment immediately. I lost it. There we go. Immediately invalidating itself when fulfilled. Fixed armies list displaying a non-functional scroll bar marker when precisely 5 armies are present. Fixed the Gestalt consciousness empires being able to enable the tutorial once in game. Fixed a missing event title in the ancient drones chain. Fixed duplicate tooltip in migration controls species rights. Fixed a couple of pre-scripted machine names popping up in random generation. Using set_disable at health no longer immediately disables ship, but just sets the health limit when it should be disabled. Disabled ships and stations no longer automatically regenerate hull, same as with armor and shields. Ships and starbases disabled through events should not auto-heal. Had to reintroduce a flag for this. Fixed the artisan troop becoming incommunicable when trying to buy a Ministry of Culture after declining an earlier offer. Improved some potentially risky code. CTD possibly already fixed, but this should catch the only possible crash in this function. Fixed a bug where the local missile target wasn't updated when the actual target was. Adding missing homeworld name to hostile servitor dialogue. Hunt for the Hyacinth event chain will no longer trigger if there are no valid systems for it. Fixed potential OOS, or I'm not sure, where ship design modifiers weren't cleared before being recalculated. Fixed references to wrong species in White Peace Officer, and numerous other bug fixes. And I think that's it. And that's quite a bit. So there we are. You can find this on Paradox Interactive's website. If you go to forum.paradoxplaza.com/forum/ and then look, it's the 2.0 Cherry H patch notes. So, thank you for joining me. This was very long, but they made a lot of changes, and we'll get more into the game as we go on. If you have questions, please let me know. Thank you for being here, and thank you for supporting me. If you want to find me on Twitch, you can find and support me over there. I am at Vinsis on Twitch, and I am at Vinsis Gaming on YouTube. So thank you, and I will catch you in the next video.